Yo, what's going on E7 fam? I'm Sue, and in this video we're going to be talking about the April 10th balance adjustment preview that was just shown earlier this morning over on Stove. You already know the drill. We'll go through each of the characters and the artifacts shown. I'll talk about things that might have landed them here on this balance adjustment preview, and then I'll talk about the changes and what I think about them. Before we jump into it though, if you are watching this video the day that it airs, remember that tonight is the big reveal of Epic 7 Origin. I will be streaming on both Twitch and YouTube starting at around 8 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. PST. The actual reveal itself will be at 11 p.m. EST, 8 p.m. PST. So if you want to come through, feel free to hang out with me. We'll kind of chit chat, theory craft, talk about what we might think it will be. I might do like a bingo card or something like that for the stream, but should be a good time. Right? You want to have me grade any of your characters like you would during Fix It Friday, we could do all that stuff as well. Hopefully, I'll see you there. Anyways, let's jump into it and talk about who we have here on this balance adjustment. We have Martial Artist Ken, Fallen Cecilia, Spirit Eye Celine, Sylvan Sage Vivian, Dragon King Sharun, Red Lidica, Red Kayron, Seaside Bellona, Lethe, Destina, Landy, Watcher Schuri, and then for the artifacts we have Reingar Special Drink, this is Seaside Bellona's artifact, Wall of Water, this is Green Landy's artifact, and Fairytale for a Nightmare, this is Fairytale Tenebria's artifact. So it's basically the same amount of artifacts we normally get, but 4 more heroes than we usually expect. Usually it's like an 8-3 split, so it is a little bit bigger than it normally is. Anyways, let's jump into it and talk about Martial Artist Ken first. So ML Ken right now is actually seeing a decent chunk of play, and that is because when you build him with 100% critical hit chance, he counters Eligos, which is a main counter for a lot of players to the character Afternoon Soak Flan. Other than that, Mort and just general power creep have kind of forced him out of the format. So let's see what he actually got here. So on his S1, it now says a successful attack always results in a critical hit. This is good. That means that you don't have to build him with 100% critical hit chance to do the thing to counter Eligos now. So that's pretty good. And then obviously his old soul burn was 10 souls to guarantee a crit on the S1. Now it's just a damage boost on the S1 because, well, the S1 now always crits, so it wouldn't make any sense to have the old soul burn. And then on top of that, his S2 Dragon Flame, right, the counter when you actually hit him, it gets an extra 10% defense penetration. So it makes him better in the niche that he has currently in the format, but it's not really going to increase his use case overall. It's a fine buff, more of a quality of life change than anything. Next up is Fallen Cecilia. This is the character that I've been hoping to see on a balance adjustment for quite some time. Obviously, we talked about her in a previous balance adjustment preview video, but those changes were since pulled, citing that they would try to come up with a set of buffs that made her feel more like her role, because previously they were going to give her a 10 speed imprint, which would have allowed her to kind of be an anchor for cleave, and people wanted her to be more of a traditional tank, so they kind of reverted those buffs, and then now they're going with these ones right here. As it stands currently, Fallen Cecilia is really only good as like an anti-cleave tank. She doesn't really have a niche. She doesn't mitigate as much damage as like Albedo or Crimson Armin. She doesn't have the, you know, kind of turnaround potential, the comeback potential of somebody like Crow. She doesn't provide the tempo that you get from a character like Adventurer Ra. So she needs something other than being like the anti-cleave tank. So let's take a look at what they got here. First up, Mistake. This is her S1. They have changed her soul burn. Previously, it was you get 2-turn cooldown reduction on the S3. They move it to the S1 for 10 souls to make it so that the provoke, which is already a 100% chance, ignores effect resistance. This is actually very powerful. This was on the original set of changes for Fallen Cecilia a couple of months back, and honestly, I'm glad to see it here. Just having the ability to spend 10 souls to lock down a key unit, based on when you deploy this, it is completely backbreaking. It could just win a game almost by itself, right? Provoking the Amaki, for example, so that way she can't get a reset is pretty good. Being able to provoke specific DPS so that they can't one-shot a character, right? Provoke a Mort when he has his S3 up, so that way you could dodge a fear. These are all things that you can do with it. It's just very, very versatile and a very strong effect overall. And now the other changes are going to be to the S2 and the S3. So the S2, we'll read the Awakened Effect one, decreases additional damage and fixed damage received by allies from heroes by 50%. When more than one damage reduction effect is granted, only its strongest effect is applied. So it says by heroes here, so we'll have to see. But from my understanding, this is essentially like the pop damage on things like 3F or Urban Shadow Shoes passive or any of those things, Cascade, which we'll talk about later. So all of that extra pop damage that people usually use is very, very strong here. This means that this character is going to be very, very good, I feel like, in the format, right? Originally, when I read this earlier this morning, I thought that this wasn't strong enough of an effect. I felt Cecilia deserved something a little bit better. Like, yes, this is a niche, but it wasn't particularly very strong. But assuming that, you know, when it says here, reduces damage received from heroes by 50%, and that includes their artifacts, right? This means that Fallen Cecilia counters Bellion on 3F, which, if you haven't, you know, been paying attention, if you've been living under a rock, 3F Bellion is like the third highest win rate hero in the entire game. Urban Shadow Shoe is just absolutely backbreaking for any turn 2 player. So being able to reduce that injury damage from 2k to 1k, especially when they have to go through all the barriers that Fallen Cecilia has, that's a pretty big deal, right? And then on top of that, she gets incredible synergy with characters like Tori or Eye Celine, who we'll be talking about later, right? Because these are characters with cockroach passives, and the best way for you to kind of defeat them is with fixed damage, right? Because most people will stack barriers around it, and, you know, in the case of like somebody like Eye Celine, right? You need to actually be able to kill them with fixed damage, because if you hit them with a critical hit, they counter, and then they'll end up healing. So that's pretty bad. So the more I think about this, the more I think Fallen Cecilia is probably back on the menu. This is a very good passive, because it counters a lot of the things that people are already playing in the format, right? Like, there is surprisingly a lot of fixed damage in the format to begin with from most of the primary damage dealers, at least the ones that have high win rates. So that definitely gives Fallen Cecilia a niche that she desperately needed, and it's a pretty good one at that. And then the last change here on the S3 for Spear of Resentment, it now dispels all buffs from all enemies. That was something that was a holdover from the previous set of changes a couple months back. And also, you can see here, it says transfers all debuffs inflicted on the caster to the enemy team. And now, I've seen people online say that they wish it transferred all debuffs from your whole team to the entire enemy team when you use this. I think that would be a little bit too strong, right? But what I will say, right, is that I think this is actually a kind of a home run of design. So, if you recall, Fallen Cecilia's rival is New Moon Luna. They did a whole event for it, right? Days of Piercing Cold for Worlds. If you actually look at the changes that they gave Fallen Cecilia, they literally hard counter New Moon Luna, at least in the sense of Fallen Cecilia, right? So the S1 could lock down the Luna so that she doesn't get to do things that would hinder your team. The S2 passive completely mitigates most of the damage that would come from Luna's S2. And then the S3 cleanses the seal herself and throws it back. And it also makes sense because it's the Spear of Resentment. She's like literally making you feel all of the pain and stuff that she has felt over all these years. And you guys know, if you've watched my balance adjustment stuff or my impressions videos in the past, I love it when the gameplay function of a character encapsulates their lore. Like, it's actually like a perfect set of changes for this character. Is it super flashy or exciting? No. But the fact is, this is the character that canonically wants to kill Luna. Her whole kit being focused on making sure that Luna can't do anything to her, I think is really, really cool. Overall, this is probably my favorite buff in the entire patch, even if it does look a little plain on paper. So next up, let's move on to Eye Celine, who is probably my least favorite character in terms of design in this game. I always talk to people in my chat because there are a couple of Eye Celine fans out there that, you know, commonly watch me on streams, and they always say, "Hey Sue, she's like the worst win rate character, worst win rate ML5 in the game. Can she get a buff? Like, what would she need to get a buff? Like, can we please get a buff? Ask Smilegate for a buff." And I always have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, this is the one character, even though I love Celine, that I will not advocate for a buff for. I want a rework for, because this is the kind of design where if the character is good, she is by far the most obnoxious character to play against in the entire game. Like, she's more annoying to play against than, like, Harsetti. She's more annoying to play against than BBK, Afternoon Soak Flying. Take your pick. The most annoying character to play, because essentially, if they set up the Spirit Eye Celine correctly, you don't actually have any recourse. You have no way to actually win the game. So I've always wanted a rework for this character, not actual boss, because I think that the current design is just very hazardous. It's very dangerous for the actual state of the game. And the fact that they've kept her basically underpowered for a while, I was okay with that until maybe they proposed a potential rework. We obviously aren't getting that here. We are getting a couple of changes, so sorry Celine fans if I'm going to be a hater, but this is a very potentially dangerous buff, especially when you factor it in with Fallen Cecilia that we just talked about, right? Because the way to counter Spirit Eye Celine is with fixed damage, and Spirit Eye Celine is very strong when you could just give her a ton of barriers. So if you're somebody that likes to play Spirit Eye Celine, Fallen Cecilia is going to probably be really, really strong with this character going forward. Anyways, let's talk about what we got here. We got a change to the S1 and the S3. Previously, the S1 had a 50% chance to proc Nimble Sword. That is the enhanced S1 that has some defense penetration, right? And if the caster was possessed, then the chance was changed from 50% to 100%. You got possession, obviously, off of the S3. And whenever you use Nimble Sword, you would dispel one debuff from the caster. And this was super useful because if you slept Spirit Eye Celine or like stunned her or whatever, she could get out of it in some cases. Maybe not stunned, but there were definitely some cases where you would hit her and she could proc, right? Because it says here, right, the dispels one debuff from the caster. This was the first thing that would happen, and then you would get the attack, kind of like how Celine, Green Celine, can pop out of things with her S2 passive. So that was very, very hard. It was another like layer to the onion of dealing with this character. So that's gone now. Instead of just needing possession, it's just whenever Spirit Eye Celine has a buff, she uses Nimble Sword at 100% rate. And now she is guaranteed an attack buff, which is pretty good because most people play her on like Dust Devil, right? I play her on Storm Sword to get the increased attack on the character when I don't have an attack buff on the team. So this is really, really strong for people who play like Dust Devil or other damage-based artifacts, especially if you're like ER Celine, right? This is going to probably feel pretty good for you because you probably weren't getting debuffed anyway. So this is just a straight up damage buff for you in a lot of scenarios, which is, again, potentially very dangerous. And then in the past, the S3 would dispel all debuffs from just Celine. Now it is a full team dispel or all debuffs, so that's very good. So she cleanses everybody. So overall, they're not like earth-shaking changes to the character. They do make her a bit better. Maybe a bit worse if you weren't on ER Spirit Eye Celine. But I think if you were on like the Christie plus Spirit Eye Celine changes or like team comp, these changes are pretty good for you. It just remains to be seen how good. Again, my worry is that this character, when they're good, they're just no fun to play against. They are like literally the no fun zone because people will ban things like New Moon Luna or like Mort, so that way there's just nothing you can really do to stop the Celine plus all of the effect resistance that they're stacking. Alright, now we move on to the girl that's getting the skin in a week's time, and that is Sylvan Sage Vivian. Currently, Sylvan Sage Vivian is both hilariously weak and incredibly strong. So what I mean by that is that there's a lot of characters that completely hose Afternoon Soak Flan right now because she's so busted, right? And those characters are, you know, top of mind. Everyone has them. They can pull them out at their disposal because, well, you can't not have an answer to Flan. She's like the strongest DPS in the format right now. And unfortunately, all of those things also just completely destroy Sylvan Sage Vivian. On top of that, Bystander Hua-Young is commonly played to beat things like New Moon Luna because she just doesn't affect Hua-Young in any way. And Vivian also just gets completely bodied by that thing. But if you just take away the fact that like there's Elagos, Solitaria, Bystander, like if you remove those things from the equation, right? if people just didn't have them or weren't going to pick them, then the state of Vivian is actually like really strong. So the character is like very, very good as like a 5th pick, but it usually ends up getting banned if all the conditions line up. So the only thing that the character really would probably need is just to not get hosed by those characters or have those characters fall out of favor. So no matter what they give her, I think it's probably just going to be just all upside. So first up, we have the change to mana attunement, right? They got rid of the speed buff, which kind of sucks, but the trade-off is you get a CR push on the S1, which means that, well, maybe like counter set might be back on the table, right? Anytime you see CR push on an S1, right, that means that counter set could potentially be back on the table. And then as you can see here on the caster's turn, if focus is full, activates the same skill as an extra attack. So essentially you get 2 S1s if your focus is full at the start of your turn. And remember, each time you use this, you get 20% attack for the rest of the match. So if you can stack it up to the max of 60%, that's very, very good. On top of this there, we have the S2 change here to Insight. Before it said Insight applies to heroes only. Now it says it only applies to PvP. I'm not really quite sure what the difference here is. I'll read the notes down below because I haven't read them yet to see if it actually explains what the difference is between these. But as far as I was aware, Insight only really worked on PvP in the first place. So maybe it's just cleaning up the language, making it more consistent with things like the Law of Skugiheim from Harsetti, because that's the language that they use for that. So we'll have to see. And then we changed the S3. So it now gives 1 focus, which it used to in the past. They took it away, giving it back. I think that's a pretty huge deal, right? And then on top of that, they've increased the cooldown from 4 turns to 5 turns. That's not a big deal because the other thing they added to the S3 is that it decreases the skill cooldowns of all allies by 1 turn, including this skill, which means that it's going to function basically the same. But now, if the stars align, you might be able to get a pretty like busted team composition of like Hellion Lua, Last Rider Crow, Green Laia, Sylvan Sage Vivian. Like those 4 together give such an insane amount of control, an insane amount of tempo, insane amount of damage, and you can't really do anything to them as far as debuffs are concerned. So if they keep adding a couple more of these decreasing skill cooldowns of all allies effects to the game, you're going to start to see some truly demonic compositions coming around. So this is just another piece of the puzzle. So while Sylvan Sage Vivian with these changes is probably going to be about the same as she was currently on the current season, depending on what we see like tonight with Origin, any potential game changes, or they release new heroes in the future, she could just be just 1 extra slot, 1 piece of this like larger machine, larger archetype that could be very, very dominant in PvP going forward. So I'm happy with the actual changes for this character. So let's see. I want to see if they've said anything. Additionally, Insight is planned to be adjusted to apply to PvP battles only. I'm wondering in what. Yeah, they don't give any kind of insight on this. It has to be. I feel like this has to be in relation to something that they're revealing later. Like, it just feels like we're cleaning up the language because maybe there might be a system where you're not playing a PvP battle, but you'll be fighting heroes. So I don't really know what this is about. Again, it just feels like we're cleaning up the language, making things more consistent, and future-proofing stuff for things that are behind the curtain that we do not yet know. Next up, we come to Dragon King Sharun, which is a character that I really have enjoyed over the last, like, 1.5 years or so of gameplay, because I think the character was super slept on at launch, and you could do a lot of really cool things with her. You could cleave with her, you could control with her. She wasn't just a silver bullet. You could build a tanky counter build, you could build a fast, like, build to cleave with, all this stuff. I really think this character was underrated, and in some cases I still think she's underrated. I still use her a lot even in the current season, right? Bystander Huayon completely hoses her, and you have to have a some kind of out to New Moon Luna, but otherwise I think the character is still pretty good, right? If I had a complaint at all, it is that you can hit her with unbuffable, or you could kind of just hit her the S2 on DDR and then still just kind of carry on as normal, right? So like it's just not as consistent, not as guaranteed to use Dragon King Sharun to beat Death Dealer, right, as somebody like Schneel. And even then Schneel has counters, right? I just want a consistent answer to Death Dealer, right? And I would like maybe potentially, as we'll see in a second, some more pressure to my opponent, right, when I pick the character, right? Because Schneel has some inevitability. Sharun's is kind of lackluster in comparison. So As we can see here, we have the S2 here, Lullaby for waves. Right, at the end of someone's turn, when an ally is inflicted with a debuff which prevents movement, so that is going to be sleep, stun, or fear, grants Cascade to all allies and dispels a debuff which prevent movement before increasing combat radius of the caster by 40%. So essentially, it was at the start of the turn. If you were asleep, Sharun would wake up and cleanse everybody, right? And then you would get to Cascade. So what people would commonly do is they would essentially look at your CR bar and go, huh, their Celine is going next, right? And then Sharun is after that. So I'll sleep Celine and give them Cascade just so that they lose their Celine turn, right? And it doesn't just dispel it right there on the spot. You have to wait for Sharun to shoot up the CR bar and then get the actual cleanse off. Well, now that's not the case. It's just straight up, hey, if you sleep me right here on the spot, that is when we get the cleanse. So you can't kind of make that play anymore. And then obviously you get more combat readiness. They've also changed Cascade. It's kind of weird that they put it here on Dragon King Sharun as opposed to a system mechanic change like they've done with Restrict or Sleep in the past at the bottom of the patch notes, because this is not the only character with Cascade. This is a change to Satori as well when you think about it, right? So as it says here, Cascade now deals from 2,500 fixed damage up to 4,000 fixed damage, which is a lot. Tori is secretly one of the better damage dealers in the game. If you've been playing in the last couple of days or so, her popularity is starting to skyrocket as more and more people realize the power of the character. And with the changes that are coming to the proposed Battle Frenzy for the next season, where we get 1,500 attack, I expect Tori to be one of the better meta DPSs. And with this change to Cascade, it's pretty strong. So we'll see how this pans out. Very good for Dragon King Sharun. Might be actually overkill though for Tori, right? And so now also on top of this, that we changed the S3. Is it going to rain? We are losing the 50% increase to combat range to the caster, which sucks because I literally just made a fun Nightmare Labyrinth team that's based around the fact that Sharun has Cascade and the 50% combat radius increase. So that's probably dead in the water. I probably can't use that anymore. And I like the turn cycling because the whole thing was Sharun would go first. You could death break people and then come back around, lap very quickly if they were going to actually try to sleep you. I think they're trying to mitigate this by giving us the 10% here. I think that's their logic. Right? I would prefer they have gone 50% here if they were going to cut this out, but that's besides the point. This sucks really to lose, but we are now getting on the S2, right? We're getting the an unbuffable on the S3, right? Unbuffable has been one of the strongest things I feel like in the current state of Epic 7. I wouldn't say it's the strongest debuff. I think that goes to defense break still, but Stun and Unbuffable and Seal are probably the next best three after Defense Break in the current state of the game. So anytime you give a character Unbuffable, especially when it's tied to a strip, is very, very powerful. So the character will still have a lot of tempo potential, a lot of cleave potential. Speaking of cleave potential, they're also changing her constellation to Scorpio from Virgo. I kind of actually hate that change because the way that I play Dragon King Sharun, the way that turn 2 players, we play Dragon King Sharun, this is actually really bad for us because we lose about, I want to say 70 base defense, and we lose about 300 to 350 base HP. And what we get for it in return is about 8 speed. And when you're playing counter Dragon King Sharun like I do from time to time, that speed doesn't matter, right? So I just straight up lose a ton of bulk for no reason. So for me, this is really bad. But if you're an aggro player or a cleaver, then this change to Dragon King Sharun going to Scorpio is a pretty good change for you, right? In case you're wondering, this is Birgitta or Ai Ningning stat line. So if you want to build your Dragon King Sharuns early, you're looking to figure out which character it is, that is the stat line. I, again, am not a big fan of the change to Scorpio from Virgo. I would have preferred they kept it as Virgo because you basically lose out on just stats everywhere just to pick up 8 speed. And the difference between 106 and 114, honestly, is pretty negligible to me. So this, to me, along with the loss of the increased combat radius of the caster by 50% on the S3, are pretty bad. But all of this on the S2 is just straight upside, so maybe it balances out. All right, now we come to Lidica. Lidica is probably the best overall change in this patch, right? Lidica is pretty bad, I would say, in the current state of Epic 7. Her only real use is Abyss 115. Like, that's like her only best-in-class, like, usage, I think, in the entire game. And then maybe every once in a while you'll see her in Advent, but for the most part, she's largely worthless. So anything they give her is going to be pretty good. So now we have on the S1, they are decreasing the damage on it, which is fine because in case you guys don't know, Lidica has the highest attack amongst all rangers in the game, and she's also ridiculously fast. Like, her stat line is actually just straight busted. The reason why she hasn't seen play is because the kit is bad, right? So decreasing the damage on the S1, that's fine. And then she has bleed, right, on the S1, as well as a detonate for bleed. That's fine. That's just allowing you to kind of cash out, get some more damage. It synergizes well with the frenzy changes that they're trying to push for next season. Right. Now, S2, Thornbush. Inflicts resource depletion on all enemies by 60% before attacking, decreasing buff durations by 1 turn, and inflicting bind for 2 turns. For each target, increases the combat race of the caster by 25%. And the cooldown is being changed from 3 turns to 4 turns, and the soul burn is being increased from 10 souls to 20 souls. So let me explain. So previously, the S2 was just an AoE blind as well as unhealable. Now, it is a 60% resource depletion, which means that you lose 60% of all of your fighting spirit and your focus, right? So, and it's before attacking, which means that if you S2 with Red Lidica, with Thornbush, right, you will remove 3 focus bars from Afternoon Soak Flan, which is conveniently what she starts with. And then you'll be able to hit her because it's before it deals damage. So it's targeted at that, and it's obviously very good against like Navy Captain Landy. It's very good against Abyssal Euphine, things like that. On top of that, it is a strip, and then it's bind. Bind is the debuff that Naqual has on her S3, which means it turns off counter attacks and it turns off certain passives. So that's very, very strong. And then for each target hit, it increases her CR by 25%, which basically is the same as Faithless Lidica. So this is just basically S2, strip their buffs, strip their focus, strip their fighting spirit, make it so they can't counter for 2 turns, right? And then take an extra turn. And this is on a character that is 10 speed faster than Faithless Lidica. So for everybody who said that Faithless Lidica deserves a speed exclusive equipment, which I still don't agree with, here you go. Red Lidica is basically the Faithless Lidica you've been asking for all of these years, because that S2 is just absolutely bonkers. And now we have also Public Execution. It is a defense break now on the S3, as well as the 100% CR decrease that it's always been. And instead of giving a skill nullifier to Lidica, it gives it to your entire team. And if the target is inflicted with bind, it ignores effect resistance. So good luck, right? Because if they bring a book, they're trying to cleave you with this character and they bring a book, they just soul burn S2, take an extra turn, and then they send whoever they need to the back of the line, and there's nothing that you can really do about it. So, yeah. Very, very wild set of changes. Here are the exclusive equipment changes, right? So you can get 100% chance on bleeding on S1. You can inflict restrict on all enemies when using the S2, or you can decrease buff durations by an additional turn when using Thornbush. So this basically, it's between these two here. So you can get either restrict if you're a cleaver playing this character to make sure that they can't cut in front of you for whatever reason. So pretty good versus like Infinite Horizon Acades. Or you could use this one, decreases buff durations by initial 1 turn, to basically just invalidate the protection set or Fallen Cecilia entirely. So, yeah. Red Lidica is by far the best thing, I think, in this entire patch, and she's going to be a terror and a nightmare for anybody who likes to play turn 2 or standard, I feel like, in the upcoming format. Next up, we'll move on to Kayron, who's not really seen anywhere. He's like kind of an anti-cleave if you just don't want to play Amiki or she's banned, but otherwise there's not really a reason to play the character. So they have increased the damage on his S1. They gave him the, increased evasion for 2 turns on his S2 when he goes to 1 HP, right? Instead of for 1 turn. And then on top of this, Apocalypse here now gives you back some damage as health when you use it, which honestly, I don't really know why, because the character does more damage the lower his health is, so having like lifesteal on the S3 is kind of weird. Like it kind of tanks his damage slightly. Apocalypse's damage is going to be increased, and then he gets the imprint change from attack to critical hit chance, which helps make gearing him quite a bit easier. So this is a good change if you do want to play the character. This is a good change in helping him out. That said, the rest of this, I don't think it really changes any of his usability. If anything, this feels like a quality of life thing. Just to get people excited and talking about the character, because if you've been paying attention to the narrative or remember where we left off with like Biblis' story, Kayron is still a major player, and I expect him to be a major player in whatever story they reveal tonight during Origins. So having him be front of mind with some changes to help promote it, because maybe there are players who just haven't experienced Kayron or whatnot, maybe this is there to get them excited. Hey, he's going to be in the story, we might as well kind of give him a touch up, make him look a little more modern with some of these changes. Next up we have Seaside Bellona, who, as far as I know, is not really played anywhere. Like, she's not even like the best use for Wyvern anymore now that Fene is out. So any changes for her are going to be good, right? So we have changes to the S2. Instead of having the 30% damage share with the foremost ally, it has for every surviving ally decreases damage suffered by 10%. So if I'm understanding that correctly, that's 40% damage reduction, right? If it includes herself, but more than one damage reduction effect is granted, only the strongest effect is applied. So it's just straight up damage reduction from all sources. That is very powerful. Damage reduction in video games is usually very, very powerful, right? Because it's a percentage, right? It's a multiplication, and that's just very strong. Just if it's straight flat damage all sources, it's very, very strong usually. And then also the defense break chance on the S2 Batback on You're Not Cute is being increased from a 50% defense break to a 75% chance. We take those, and then the S3 is going to have its damage dealt increased, but as you can see, the critical hit here increases damage dealt. They're probably just moving this damage, bonus damage, into the base damage of the move, and it is an AoE strip. I would definitely take a look at Seaside Bellona with these changes, right? These are deceptively good. Again, damage suffered, right? Damage reduction means that the character can survive a lot. And we're in a format right now where there's a lot of very good red characters and very few good blue characters, right? So Seaside Bellona might potentially make a resurgence because she might just be that really tanky bruiser that we were looking for that puts out consistent damage, right? Having a 75% defense break that's AoE is nothing to scoff at. Remember, I literally said earlier in this very same video that I think defense break is the best debuff in the game. So yeah, this is definitely going to be one that I'm going to try out. That it's going to be one to watch for. Next up, we come to Lethe. Lethe is probably my favorite character that was released during 2023. I really love this character, but that said, she's not good, and the reason she's not good is because injury is incredibly strong in the format, and as long as it's strong in the format, and she has no way to kind of mitigate that, I don't really see the character actually being very good. Lethe is one of the worst limiteds right now, and Dark Corvus is one of the worst ML5s right now, and it's because the current format, characters like Harsetti, Death Dealer Ray, Urban Shadow Shu are so good, and they just completely hose the character. So as long as those three characters are good, and I don't have anything to kind of help against them, character I don't think is going to see any play. And that's kind of how I feel here about the changes that she got. Increases the combat radius of the caster when she defeats somebody with her extra attack Call of the Abyss, right? Amount recovered and damage dealt increased proportional to caster's max health, and they're going to increase the damage on Call of the Abyss. That's cool, right? Like, it's cool that you're going to up the damage on the character, and you're going to give her this CR push when she's already winning, right? Because if you get Call of the Abyss off, you're already winning. This is a win more effect. I honestly think this doesn't really change anything, right? How are you ever supposed to play Lethe in a format where Death Dealer Ray, Harsetti, and Urban Shadow Shu are so prevalent? So to me, this is just a total swing and a miss. I would love to be wrong. I would love for somebody to show me a showcase of their like super fast Lethe where this, 50% CR push just absolutely decimates people. She cycles like a fiend. That would be super cool, but I'm not seeing it. I don't think this changes anything. I think this is just fluff filler to make you feel like they're doing something about Lethe, but no, I don't think this does anything. Next up is Destina. Destina right now just doesn't really provide enough tempo, and there are better cleansers in the format. So let's see what she got here. So the amount recovered on the S1 Key to an Oath, as well as its Soulburn counterpart, is going to be increased. The Spirit's Blessing that gives her the extra 60 effect resistance is going to be lasting for an extra turn at the start of battle. And then also the Revive is going to be up from 20% to 10%. And the cooldown on the S3 is reduced by 1 turn. I don't think this really changes anything. If anything, because it's called Epic 7 Origin. And as far as we know, in the past, there was, Destina and Ruel. I think this is very much the same thing as Kayron. Destina is going to be part of the story, and they don't want her looking, terrible, out of date. Kind of give her a small touch up to kind of make her feel a bit more presentable. She's going to have maybe some potential screen time. Next up, we come to Landy. Landy at some point was the best character in the game, but those days are long behind us. Landy right now is only really used as like a very, very long shot answer to Diane, who's already pretty uncommon, I feel like, on ladder. So anything that she could get would be pretty good. Right now, I feel like the big problem with Landy is that just having Guiding Light isn't enough. She needs access to like another real artifact, and that's pretty much what they gave her here. Her S1 Fire is going to have its damage dealt increased, which is insanity to me because the Chief is on the scene gives such an insane amount of damage to begin with as a passive. So increasing the base damage on the move when you have a passive this good means that the character should hit like an absolute truck when you use her. And then on top of that, she starts with Stealth for 1 turn, which means you don't need Guiding Light on the character. And I guess we'll take this time to scroll down and talk about Wall of Order, which is her limited artifact that accompanies her, because they changed it to basically accommodate these changes. So Wall of Order previously would have a 5 to 10% chance, depending on artifact level, to give you greater attack buff for 1 turn, right? Based on the number of buffs that are on the enemy team. And that was obviously like a huge amount of damage. But the main thing that was ridiculous about Wall of Order was that you got this fat barrier at the end of every turn. It was usually like 60% of Landy's life, making her basically unkillable if she ever got to her first turn and they didn't have like a strip or unbuffable or anything like that. So that was super sick on Wall of Order. It was just very, very hard to use. So now they've changed Wall of Order to have a slightly higher percent chance to give you the greater attack buff, right? So again, if you're playing against like protection set, immunity, tanks, or like DN or whatever have you, you have a pretty good chance of getting greater attack buff. And again, the character does a lot of damage because of the Chief is on the scene, right? So giving her greater attack buff is like a huge, huge deal. And at the end of the turn, it has a 100% chance, depending on artifact level, 50 to 100% chance to grant stealth for 1 turn. So basically, they have changed Wall of Order in such a way that for Landy specifically, it's just Guiding Light that gives greater attack buff. And honestly, that might be enough to bring the character back into the fold. With the extra 1500 base attack, and the Chief is on the scene, and Gab from Wall of Order, I expect Landy to just vomit out a ton of damage, right? It's not like stealth characters are particularly bad. Look at Urban Shadow Shu, right? You even counter Landy like might be back on the menu, right? You're just like in stealth and just have a character that they can get to it. You have the chance to counter, right? And it's going to do a lot more damage with this change, right? I'm excited to see how Landy plays out next season. Like, I've always really liked this character. This has been one of my favorite characters to play DPS-wise pretty much in the game's history. And I think that these changes along with Wall of Order are good enough where maybe we can actually get there with this character. And then the last character to talk about here is Watcher Schuri. So his only change here is going to be on the S3. It gives him 50% hit chance when he uses the S3, and they are changing his exclusive equipment that normally would reduce the cooldown of the move by 1 turn to hit chance of an extra 50%. So he gets 100% hit chance on his S3 with these changes and the right exclusive equipment, which is pretty funny because his S3 line, in case you don't know, in the English dub is "I won't miss" when he uses S3. And so people always lamented that he misses. Still, he usually does enough damage where he kills through a miss, but he doesn't kill Afternoon Soak Flan. Now he kills Afternoon Soak Flan. So this is another option to deal with that character. If you're having trouble, you could build like a mid-speed Watcher Schuri and just kind of do that. Like, honestly, if you haven't built Watcher Schuri yet, please build the character. I think every single account should have this character. Even slow characters. He's one of the best characters in the entire game for PvE. Right? And now he has even more PvP viability. Smoggy, if you're watching though, can we get some hit chance on my man Blue Tywin, right? My man says he never misses. He still misses. You made sure that Watcher Schuri doesn't miss. I would like to see that Tywin also never misses, please and thank you. And so to round out the video, let's talk about the last two artifacts that we haven't talked about. First up is Reingar's Special Drink. They're increasing the damage on this artifact. That's pretty much it. Currently, Seaside Bellona is the only real user of the artifact. Maybe Biblis, but that's about it. So again, this lends credence to what I was talking about. Maybe Seaside Bellona might actually be a very real thing with the damage reduction built into it, and now obviously extra defense break chance and additional damage to boot on the artifact. And then finally here we have Fairytale for a Nightmare. They are increasing the dispel chance, right? It was normally a 60% fixed chance. Now it's 40 to 80% chance based on artifact level. My assumption is that it's 60% at plus 15, so you'll see no changes there. But if you have a plus 31, you get the higher dispel chance, and you also get an additional 500 fixed damage on it. So this is going to be very good for Solitaria, very good for Harsetti. Not so much, I think, for Archdemon Shadow. I've been playing a lot of Archdemon Shadow lately, and I think that the time for Fairytale for a Nightmare on that character has kind of sunset. I think with the exclusive equipment, having the soul burn that you get from book is just way too valuable to give up for Fairytale for a Nightmare. So again, this is kind of like a minor buff to like Harsetti and Solitaria, which honestly are not like the best characters, I feel like. Anyway, maybe Harsetti's a bit better, right? But like Solitaria, I think could use some help. So good set of changes overall. This patch, just in total, is a good balance patch in my opinion. It has a lot of fun and interesting things to think about, like, is Landy good? Should we try Landy? Like, it's not obvious if Landy is very strong or just alright. It's not very obvious that Seaside Bellona is very strong or just alright, you know? It's not very obvious if Sylvan Sage Vivian is very strong off the bat or just alright. So these are things to explore. These are the kinds of balance patches I want to see, because it's not like super obvious, right? Like back in the day, they would give us like, oh, Ambitious Tywin, bro, just now has a defense break and ignores ER and gets all this other stuff. And you'd be like, that's broken. And it would just be upsetting, right? You just see stuff and be like, that's so obviously busted. Or like when Navy Captain Landy was just banned all the time or winning at Worlds in 2023. The next patch was just like, it always has a critical hit. It always just hoses the Landy. And it was like, cool. So the whole patch is just there to hate on one character. And yes, there's some flan hate here in this patch. But for the most part, these just seem like good quality changes to the game that make the game look more fun. And that's what I want. I want more balance patches like this. So please and thank you, Smoggy. Anyways, if you're around, again, later tonight, I'll be streaming the reveal of Epic 7 Origin. Again, start at 8 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. PST. It'll be here on YouTube, so you can just check underneath the live tab here on the channel. Make sure you get subscribed and ding the notification bell so that way you can see exactly when I go live. Otherwise, you can check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/IM_TSU. And let me know down in the comments section how you feel about the balance patch. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.